Someone inside the NASCAR garage might have just created one of the most dangerous situations Kyle Busch could possibly face at Charlotte, and no, it's not because of a rival team. It's because Shane van Gisbergen is suddenly stepping into the exact same Spire Motorsports environment at the same time Kyle Busch is trying to dominate it. Now fans are asking a crazy question nobody expected to ask this early in SVG's NASCAR journey. What happens if Shane van Gisbergen is actually fast enough to challenge Kyle Busch in equal equipment? Because if that happens at Charlotte, this entire conversation around SVG could explode to another level. What makes this story so fascinating isn't just that Shane van Gisbergen is entering another NASCAR race weekend. It's the timing of it all. Kyle Busch is already scheduled to run multiple Truck Series races with Spire Motorsports this season. And Charlotte was supposed to feel like one of those weekends where Busch reminds everyone why he's still one of the most feared drivers in NASCAR history. But now SVG enters the picture at the exact same organization, with fans immediately comparing the two before the trucks have even hit the track. And honestly, that's where things get dangerous for Kyle Busch. Because SVG is no longer being viewed as some international curiosity trying NASCAR for fun. That phase is over. After everything he's already done in stock cars, fans now expect him to compete immediately anytime he enters a race, especially on tracks where car control, adaptability, and raw racing instinct matter more than experience alone. And Charlotte might be the first weekend where the expectations around SVG become genuinely dangerous. The wild part is that the second SVG stepped into this Truck Series opportunity with Spire Motorsports, he instantly created a direct comparison to Kyle Busch, whether people wanted it or not. Because every lap, every practice session, every qualifying run, fans will compare the speed. If Shane van Gisbergen gets exposed at Charlotte, critics are immediately going to point at Kyle Busch and say this is exactly why NASCAR experience still matters. But the second SVG starts matching Kyle Busch on speed, that's when this entire NASCAR conversation flips upside down. Because nobody casually runs near Kyle Busch in NASCAR trucks, especially not in equal equipment, especially not this quickly. We're talking about one of the greatest Truck Series drivers the sport has ever seen. A guy who has embarrassed entire fields before. A driver so dominant in lower series races that fans used to complain whenever he entered because they already expected him to win. So the second Shane van Gisbergen accepted this challenge, he basically signed up for one of the toughest comparisons possible in NASCAR right now. And somehow, that's exactly why fans are so excited, because there's this growing feeling around SVG that he thrives in uncomfortable situations. Every time people think something might be too difficult, he adapts faster than expected. We already saw him shock NASCAR during his early stock car appearances, and now the expectations around him are completely different from what they were a year ago. At first, fans were just curious if he could survive in NASCAR. Now they want to know how far he can actually go. And Charlotte might give everyone a huge clue, especially because Spire Motorsports isn't some random underdog operation anymore. The organization has become increasingly aggressive about building competitive programs and putting talented drivers in good equipment. So when fans realized both Kyle Busch and Shane van Gisbergen would be connected to the same truck program, the reactions online exploded almost immediately. Because now people can actually compare performance in similar machinery instead of arguing through hypotheticals. That's a completely different conversation. And here's the part nobody can ignore. Kyle Busch probably understands exactly how dangerous SVG could become if this adaptation process keeps accelerating. Kyle has spent his entire career understanding talent faster than most people in the garage. He knows when a driver is legitimate, and SVG keeps showing signs that his learning curve might be way faster than expected. That doesn't mean Shane van Gisbergen suddenly becomes the favorite over Kyle Busch. Let's not get crazy here. Busch still has years of NASCAR experience, racecraft, and knowledge that very few drivers can match. But what makes this weekend so compelling is the uncertainty surrounding SVG's ceiling. Because honestly, nobody knows where the limit is yet. And if he flashes elite speed at Charlotte, the NASCAR conversation around him is going to become impossible to ignore. Especially when you consider how difficult trucks can be for newcomers. These races are aggressive, chaotic, and completely different from what many international drivers are used to. You're constantly fighting dirty air, unpredictable restarts, close contact, and drivers willing to throw impossible moves just to gain a position. That's why so many fans are fascinated watching SVG throw himself into these challenges anyway. He's not taking easy routes. He keeps putting himself into uncomfortable situations against experienced NASCAR veterans. And now, one of those veterans happens to be Kyle Busch, which instantly raises the stakes for everyone watching. Because the second this weekend turns ugly for SVG, the backlash is going to hit fast. Because suddenly people will claim the hype moved way too far ahead of reality. But if he runs well, then suddenly fans start wondering how quickly he could become a serious threat across multiple NASCAR series. And trust me, people inside the garage are paying attention to that possibility too. One strong performance against someone like Kyle Busch can completely change how drivers, crew chiefs, and organizations view you. It changes expectations. It changes respect levels. And sometimes, it changes opportunities. That's why this Charlotte weekend feels bigger than just another Truck Series race. There's a real sense that SVG is entering a moment where NASCAR fans could start viewing him differently entirely. Not as a visiting superstar, not as a novelty story, but as someone who might genuinely become a long-term problem for established NASCAR names. And if that happens, Kyle Busch could unintentionally become part of the story that pushes V's reputation to another level. Now, before we keep going, if you're enjoying the video and want more high-intensity NASCAR stories every single day, make sure you subscribe to NASCAR Nation News because we're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscriber seriously helps the channel grow. The craziest thing about all of this is how quickly SVG has changed the NASCAR conversation around international drivers. For years, fans treated crossover attempts like cool side stories that rarely became serious threats. But Shane van Gisbergen's success started breaking that mindset apart almost immediately. Now every race weekend feels like another test people are obsessively watching. Can he adapt here? Can he handle this style? Can he compete against NASCAR veterans on their turf? And Charlotte gives him another massive opportunity to answer those questions. Especially because Kyle Busch won't leave any room for excuses. That's what makes him so dangerous as a benchmark. If Busch dominates, people will say that's exactly what should happen. But if SVG closes the gap more than expected, then suddenly the entire NASCAR world starts wondering how scary this could become long-term. And honestly, that's why this matchup feels so important. Because it's bigger than just finishing positions. It's about perception. It's about whether Shane van Gisbergen is still developing, or whether he's already becoming a legitimate threat to some of NASCAR's biggest names much faster than anyone predicted. And if Charlotte turns into one of those weekends where SVG shocks people again, Kyle Busch might accidentally become the benchmark that launches SVG into NASCAR superstardom.